what happened to G Money happened to him. You know what I'm saying? What do you think about that?
I don't know. Like I'm gonna put it like this: shit. G Money know the reason what happened to him. You feel what I'm saying? Like if he was here to tell a story, then he'll tell you. Like he know the reason what happened to him. Some might say cheese, some might say Instagram, whatever the case may be, but he know the reason what happened.
NBA, Lil Pap caught 5 years for accessory to murder in the G Money case. But here's what they ain't tell you. This dude is NBA, Ben 10's older brother and Youngboys' most loyal crash dummy. While other rappers got bodyguards, YB had Pap ready to throw his whole life away just to stay in the gang. No cap, this man been sliding for NBA since day one, and the streets know he ain't done yet. What really went down with G Money's murder will shock you, and how Pap beat that case just to get right back to the trenches is some wild type shit. OTS Lil Pap was NBA's most feared enforcer, but the Fed's been watching him since he was a teenager. The G Money situation didn't just take out TBG's biggest star, it showed the world how deep NBA's street operations really go. To understand how this whole bloody war started and why Pap was willing to risk everything for Youngboy, we gotta go back to where it all began in the murder capital of Louisiana. Let's rewind to the early 2000s in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Back then, the city was already a war zone, but things was about to get way more deadly. NBA Lil Pap, real name DeAndre Fields, was born and raised in the 38th Street area, one of the most dangerous blocks in BR. This ain't no regular hood, fam. We talking about a place where kids learn to duck bullets before they learn to ride bikes. Pap grew up in a single-parent household with his mama struggling to keep food on the table. His pops was in and out of prison for drug charges, leaving his mama to raise him and his little brother Ben 10 by herself. The streets was calling early, and by the time he was 12, he was already running with older dudes who was deep in that life. His little brother Ben 10 was following the same path, but Pap always made sure to protect him from the worst of it. Now, to really understand this story, you gotta know how Baton Rouge operates. It ain't like other cities where gangs got colors and territories clearly marked. In BR, it's all about your block, your family, and who you willing to ride for. Pap's block was beefing with multiple sets, and he learned early that respect only comes through violence. The 38th Street area where Pap grew up was controlled by different crews depending on what block you was on. You had bottom boy guerrillas on one side, top boy guerrillas on another, and smaller sets scattered throughout. Pap learned to navigate all these politics while he was still in middle school. By 13, Pap was already carrying a gun to school. Not for show, but because he knew dudes from rival blocks was looking for him. His reputation was growing fast. This young dude who didn't talk much but would put you in the dirt if you crossed him wrong. The first time Pap really made a name for himself was when he was 14. Some older dudes from a rival set tried to rob him and his little brother while they was walking home from school. Instead of giving up his chain and money, Pap pulled out his piece and started shooting. One of the robbers caught a bullet in the leg and the other two ran off. Word spread quick that this young dude wasn't to be played with. By 15, Pap had already caught his first body, though the streets kept that quiet. He wasn't bragging about it or posting on social media like these young dudes do now. Pap moved in silence, and that's what made him so dangerous. While other teenagers was worried about school and girls, this dude was studying how to make people disappear. To understand why Pap became what he became, you gotta understand Baton Rouge in the 2000s. This city was a powder keg ready to explode. You had Lil Boozy locked up on murder charges, leaving a power vacuum in the streets. Different crews was fighting for territory, drug corners, and respect. The murder rate in Baton Rouge was through the roof. In 2012, the city had 83 murders. That's more than some entire states. Young dudes was dying every week and the police couldn't keep up. It was like the Wild West, but with automatic weapons and social media beef. Pap was coming up in this environment where showing weakness meant death. You couldn't just be tough, you had to prove you was willing to kill. And Pap proved that over and over again. The crazy thing about Pap is how smart he was about his moves. While other young killers was sloppy and got caught quick, Pap studied the game. He learned from older heads who had been in the streets for decades. He understood that real power came from moving in silence and never leaving witnesses. Here's where it gets crazy. Around 2014, when Youngboy was still just Kentrell and trying to make it in the rap game, he needed real street credibility. TBG had been showing him love, but YB knew he needed his own crew. People who would die for him, not just rap with him. Pap first met Youngboy through the streets. YB was beefing with some local dudes over a girl, and Pap stepped in to handle the situation. According to sources close to the situation, Pap didn't even know who Youngboy was at first. He just saw a young dude getting pressed and decided to help. The story goes that YB was at a house party when some dudes from a rival set showed up looking for trouble. They was talking about robbing YB for his chain and embarrassing him in front of everybody. That's when Pap stepped up. He didn't say much, just walked up to the main dude talking crazy and put a gun to his head. The whole party went silent. "Y'all got a problem with my little homie?" Pap asked. The dudes backed down real quick and left the party. That's when Youngboy knew he needed Pap on his team. But Youngboy recognized something in Pap that most people missed. This wasn't just another street dude looking for clout. Pap was a natural-born killer who moved with discipline and never left evidence behind. YB started bringing Pap around more, and that's when NBA really became a force in Baton Rouge. Let me break it down for you. NBA wasn't just a record label, it was a criminal organization with Youngboy as the face and Pap as the muscle. While YB was in the studio making hits, Pap was in the streets making sure nobody could touch their operation. The relationship between YB and Pap was deeper than just business though. Pap saw something in Youngboy that reminded him of himself. A young dude trying to make it out the hood but still willing to get his hands dirty. YB saw Pap as the big brother he never had, someone who would protect him no matter what. The crazy part is, Youngboy barely took pictures with Pap. You won't find them together on Instagram or at parties. YB knew that keeping distance was smart business. If something happened, he could claim he barely knew the dude. But behind the scenes, Pap was getting paid good money to be Youngboy's personal hitman. As Youngboy's music career started taking off, Pap's role became more important. NBA wasn't just about making music. They was building a street empire that stretched across Louisiana and into other states. Pap became the enforcer for NBA's drug operations. When dealers didn't pay what they owed, Pap paid them a visit. When rival crews tried to move in on NBA territory, Pap made sure they understood the consequences. He was like the CEO of violence for the whole organization. The money was flowing heavy by 2015. Youngboy was getting bigger in the rap game, and the street money was helping fund his music career. Pap was making more money than he ever dreamed of, but he wasn't flashy with it. While other dudes was buying chains and cars, Pap was investing in guns and paying for lawyers. What made Pap so valuable to NBA was his ability to handle problems without creating new ones. When he eliminated a threat, it stayed eliminated. He didn't leave loose ends or witnesses who could come back to cause problems later. But the success also brought more attention from law enforcement. The feds was starting to notice NBA's activities, and they was building files on all the main players. Pap's name was at the top of their list. Fast forward to 2016, and the beef between NBA and TBG was getting deadly. G Money had been dissing Youngboy hard, talking about his sister and calling him out on social media. But what really set things off was when G did that Say Cheese interview. In that interview, G Money basically disrespected everything Youngboy stood for. He talked about sleeping with YB's sister, called him ungrateful, and made it clear he didn't respect NBA as a real threat. That interview went viral, and Youngboy knew he had to respond, not with music, but with violence. The disrespect was too public and too personal. In the streets, you can't let that type of disrespect slide without consequences. If Youngboy didn't respond, it would make NBA look weak, and other crews would start testing them. According to street sources, Youngboy called a meeting with his inner circle. Pap was there, along with a few other trusted soldiers. YB made it clear that G Money had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The disrespect was too public, too personal. Something had to be done. Now here's what the feds never proved, but the streets know is true. Youngboy didn't directly order the hit, but he made it clear that whoever handled the G Money problem would be taken care of for life. Pap understood the assignment without it being spelled out. The planning phase took weeks. Pap wasn't the type to move recklessly. He studied G Money's routine, learned his habits, and figured out the best way to get close to him. G was predictable. He always recorded at the same studio on Dallas Drive, usually late at night when there wasn't much traffic around. Pap started doing surveillance on the studio, learning when G came and went, who was usually with him, and what kind of security he had. The more he watched, the more he realized G was making it easy. He was posting his location on social media, showing up at the same spots at the same times, and not taking proper security precautions. On September 9th, 2017, everything came together. G Money was at the studio working on a feature, posting on social media, and basically telling the world where he was. That was his first mistake. According to the streets, Pap got the call that G was at the studio and it was time to move. He grabbed his crew and headed to Dallas Drive. They waited in the parking lot, knowing G would have to come out eventually, The plan was simple but effective. Pap had 2 shooters positioned near the studio exit while he stayed in the getaway car with the engine running. When G Money finally walked out of that studio, he was alone and distracted, probably thinking about the music he just recorded. The shooters were ready. Multiple shots rang out and G Money was left dying in that parking lot. The whole thing took less than 30 seconds. By the time anyone realized what happened, Pap and his crew was already gone. But here's the crazy part. Pap wasn't even the shooter. According to sources, he was the driver and the planner. But he had one of his younger soldiers pull the trigger. That's how smart this dude was. He orchestrated the whole thing but kept his hands technically clean. The aftermath was immediate. G Money's death sent shockwaves through Baton Rouge and the hip-hop world. TBG was devastated and they knew exactly who was behind it, but proving it would be a whole different story. What made this hit so effective was how clean it was. No witnesses, no cameras, no evidence left behind. Pap had planned every detail, from the escape route to the disposal of the weapons. This wasn't some sloppy street shooting, this was a professional assassination. The streets started talking immediately. Everyone knew NBA was behind it, but nobody could prove anything. Pap's reputation grew even more. This dude had just eliminated one of Baton Rouge's biggest rappers and walked away clean. G Money's murder wasn't Pap's only work for NBA. The streets know he was involved in multiple other situations that never made the news. When Youngboys manager Big Dump got killed in 2018, that was TBG getting revenge. But Pap made sure NBA hit back even harder. According to sources, Pap was behind at least 3 other murders between 2017 and 2019. These weren't random street beefs. These were calculated hits designed to protect NBA's reputation and eliminate threats to Youngboys' empire. One of the most brutal was the elimination of a TBG affiliate who had been talking to the police about the G Money murder. This dude thought he was safe because he had moved to another city, but Pap tracked him down and made sure he never talked again. Another hit involved a drug dealer who had been trying to muscle in on NBA territory. Pap didn't just kill him, he made it public, leaving the body where other dealers would find it as a message. The message was clear: don't mess with NBA money. The crazy thing is, Pap never bragged about any of this. While other street dudes was posting guns on Instagram and talking tough, Pap stayed quiet and kept working. He understood that real killers move in silence. Youngboy knew what he had in Pap, a loyal soldier who would never snitch and never back down. In return, YB made sure Pap's family was taken care of and that he had the best lawyers money could buy when things got hot. But all this violence was attracting federal attention. The FBI was building a RICO case against NBA, and Pap's name was all over their investigation. They had wiretaps, surveillance footage, and informants all pointing to Pap as NBA's main enforcer. By 2018, the feds was closing in on Pap. They had been building a case for over a year, using everything from phone records to witness testimony. The G Money murder was just the tip of the iceberg. They was looking at NBA as a criminal enterprise. The investigation revealed how sophisticated NBA's operations really was. They wasn't just a rap crew. They was running drugs, guns, and murder for hire across multiple states. Pap was identified as the head of enforcement, responsible for eliminating threats and maintaining discipline within the organization. Federal agents had been watching Pap for months, documenting his movements and building a timeline of his activities. They knew about his role in the G Money murder, but they needed more evidence to make a case that would stick. The breakthrough came when they flipped one of Pap's associates. This dude was facing life in prison on drug charges and decided to cooperate rather than spend the rest of his life behind bars. He gave the feds detailed information about NBA's structure and Pap's role in multiple murders. But even with a cooperating witness, the feds knew they had problems with their case. Pap was too smart to leave direct evidence, and most of the witnesses was either dead or too scared to testify. In 2019, 2 years after G Money's murder, the feds finally caught up to Pap. They had been building a case using phone records, surveillance footage, and witness testimony, but they still couldn't prove he was the actual shooter. The arrest went down at Pap's mama's house early in the morning. Federal agents surrounded the block and came in heavy, expecting resistance. But Pap didn't fight. He knew this day was coming and was prepared for it. When they arrested Pap, he didn't say a word. No cooperation, no plea for mercy, nothing. He knew the game and played it perfectly. His lawyers, paid for by NBA money, fought every charge and every piece of evidence. The prosecution tried to paint Pap as a cold-blooded killer who had terrorized Baton Rouge for years. They brought in witnesses who testified about his reputation and his role in NBA's criminal activities. But they couldn't prove murder beyond a reasonable doubt. The defense strategy was simple: deny everything and force the prosecution to prove their case. Pap's lawyers argued that he was being targeted because of his association with Youngboy and that the government was trying to use him to get to the rapper. During the trial, some crazy stuff came out. The prosecution revealed that Pap had been under surveillance for over 2 years, and they had recordings of him discussing various criminal activities. But the recordings was mostly vague, and Pap was too smart to say anything directly incriminating. The jury deliberated for 3 days before reaching a verdict. They couldn't convict on murder, but they found him guilty of accessory after the fact. The judge sentenced him to 5 years in federal prison. Pap took the sentence like a soldier. No emotion, no complaints, just acceptance. He knew he was lucky to avoid a murder conviction, and 5 years was better than life in prison. During his time locked up, Youngboy kept his word. Pap's commissary stayed full, his family was taken care of, and he had protection inside. That's loyalty, and it's why Pap never considered cooperating with the feds. Pap's time in federal prison was different from what most people expect. He wasn't just surviving, he was thriving. His reputation preceded him, and other inmates knew not to test him. But prison also gave Pap time to think and plan. He used his time to study law, learning about the legal system and how to beat future cases. He also maintained his connections on the outside, making sure NBA's operations continued even with him locked up. The loyalty between Pap and Youngboy never wavered during his incarceration. YB made sure Pap's family was taken care of, paying for his kids' school and making sure his mama didn't want for nothing. In return, Pap never said a word about NBA's activities, even when the feds offered him deals to cooperate. Other inmates tried to get information out of Pap about Youngboy, thinking they could use it for their own cases or sell it to the media, but Pap shut that down quick. He made it clear that talking about NBA business was a death sentence, even in federal prison. Pap came home in 2022 after serving most of his sentence. You'd think he would lay low, maybe try to go legitimate, but that ain't how real soldiers operate. Within months of getting out, Pap was back in the streets and back to sliding for NBA. The crazy part is, Youngboy was on house arrest and then locked up on federal charges, but Pap was still putting in work. That's the level of loyalty we talking about. Even with his boss unavailable, Pap was still protecting the NBA brand. The streets had changed while Pap was locked up. New crews had emerged, old beefs had evolved, and the police was watching everything more closely. But Pap adapted quick, using everything he learned in prison to move smarter and stay ahead of law enforcement. In 2023, Pap got caught up in another situation. This time, a drive-by shooting that left multiple people shot. The feds hit him with 10 counts of attempted murder. Once again, Pap didn't cooperate and didn't give up any information about who ordered the hit. The latest charges against Pap show that he ain't learned nothing from his first bid, or maybe he learned too much. The feds say he was involved in a drive-by shooting that targeted rival gang members, leaving 3 people wounded but alive. What's crazy about this case is how much evidence the feds have. They got surveillance footage, ballistics evidence, and witness testimony. But Pap's lawyers is fighting everything, claiming the evidence was obtained illegally and that their client is being targeted because of his past. The prosecution is trying to use Pap's previous conviction to show a pattern of violence, but his defense team is arguing that he's paid his debt to society and deserves a fair trial on the current charges. What makes Pap so dangerous isn't just his willingness to kill, it's his intelligence and loyalty. This dude has been arrested multiple times, faced life in prison, and never once considered snitching. In today's rap game, that type of loyalty is rare. Youngboy built NBA into a multi-million-dollar empire, but it was soldiers like Pap who made sure nobody could touch it. While other rappers got extorted or robbed, NBA stayed untouchable because everyone knew what Pap was capable of. The streets respect Pap because he never switched up. He could have cooperated with the feds, got a reduced sentence, and disappeared into witness protection. Instead, he chose to stay loyal and face whatever consequences came with that choice. His relationship with his little brother Ben 10 also shows another side of Pap. Despite being a killer in the streets, he always protected his family and made sure they was taken care of. Ben 10's success in the rap game is partly because Pap cleared the path for him. Today, Pap is still fighting his latest case, and Youngboy is dealing with his own federal charges, but the bond between them remains unbroken. That's the type of loyalty that built NBA, and it's why they'll always be respected in these streets. NBA Lil Pap represents something that's disappearing from hip-hop, real street credibility backed up by action. While other dudes rap about being killers, Pap actually lived that life and paid the price for it. His story shows the dark side of rap success, the violence, the loyalty, and the consequences that come with building an empire in the streets. Whether you respect it or not, you gotta acknowledge that Pap is one of the realest soldiers the game has ever seen. The question now is whether he'll beat his latest case or spend the rest of his life behind bars. Either way, his legacy as NBA's most loyal hitman is already cemented in the streets of Baton Rouge. No cap, this dude really about that life, and the streets will never forget what he did for NBA Youngboy.